Happy FanGirl Friday. Welcome again. It's FanGirl Friday Live. My name's Anita Castellar. We do work with FanGirl Consulting and Brand Management. That is our home company. But every Friday we celebrate with FanGirl Friday Live, and we invite our best friends in the industry about fandom and pop culture to talk about their businesses, talk about their fandom, talk about business behind the fandom. And this week we have Mass Republic. Yay! Welcome, you guys. Welcome, Ruben. Welcome, Kevin. Nice to see you. We see each other probably on a weekly basis, but it's nice to have you on the show for the first time. Tell us about yourselves. Ruben, how about you tell us first who you are, your title, what do you do for Mass Republic?
All right, we're going to start off slow, I guess.
Got to ease into it.
Yeah, I've been, first of all, I've been in Lucha Libre or masked Mexican wrestling. For those who aren't familiar with Lucha Libre, it's pro wrestling, Mexican style. If you think of the masks, the capes, easiest thing to refer to is Nacho Libre. Everybody knows that. So I've been a fan since I was a kid. Started off watching it. I was never into Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. To me, my superheroes were these luchadors that I saw in the ring or I got to see at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. So I grew up as a fan. Fast forward as a teen, I was watching them at the Auditorio de Tijuana, still continue to be a fan. And through a chance meeting with some friends at a job that I had, I met Rey Mysterio Sr. out of Tijuana, Mexico, legendary luchador out of northern Mexico, Tijuana area. And we became friends. Before I knew it, I was on the road with him, traveling through Southern California and northern Mexico. And then we had this crazy idea of just starting to run our own live shows, which we did out of San Diego. And that led into kind of getting into this Lucha Libre world. And through Conan, a wrestler that everybody knows, legendary luchador wrestler, both in Mexico and the U.S., met Kevin. And Kevin had a gazillion ideas, and I had a gazillion ideas. We realized that a lot of them were kind of meshing together, and we decided to start this little thing called Mass Republic that originally I was doing just live shows and wrestling gear, because one of my biggest pet peeves is watching somebody go into a ring with mismatching outfits. Color scheme is red and gold. There's no reason you should have orange boots or black boots.
Yeah.
So with the help of a gentleman that came from Cuernavaca, Mexico to Tijuana, we teamed up and we're just making gear for Conan, Psychosis, Extreme Tiger, Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan when he went to WWE. We did his first gear. So we started off doing live events and representing talent and gear. And then with Kevin, we kind of just got into all sorts of other things. But I guess technically I'm the CEO founder of Mass Republic. But it's basically a machine with a lot of moving parts and a lot of people and great friends and partners, including FanGirl. But I'll let Kevin talk about what else we do other than gear representing talent and live events, because it's very complex, and that's where Kevin comes in and does a very good job of managing and kind of steering the ship towards all the 20,000 other things that we do.
So Kevin, how did you get involved in Lucha Libre and Mass Republic and all? I know that, as Ruben said, you guys got introduced through Conan, but what's your background in there? Because I'm sure you were interested before you even got to Conan part.
Oh, yeah. So when I was 12, I decided I wanted to work in pro wrestling for like my career, my life. And by 14, I was actually doing it. I had my foot in the door, writing for this local promotion for their program. And then I became a timekeeper at their events, the guy that rings the bell. And then one day the ring announcer didn't show up. So suddenly I was the ring announcer and really, and then I was a junior or senior in high school by that point. And the company I was working for, Slammers Wrestling Federation, which was this just really tiny local promotion that happened to have a wrestling school like 10 minutes from my parents' house where I grew up. They were always promoting like, hey, we can come out to your school or your church or your wherever and do a fundraiser. And so I was student body treasurer at the time. And so I was able to convince my school to bring a wrestling show to the school. And that was my first like step in promoting pro wrestling. And I made my first money in pro wrestling that day, which was about $3 and something cents on a check somewhere. But so I always knew pro wrestling, and I went to college and I got a degree, and it was literally like, do I go to law school or do I keep pursuing pro wrestling? And I went the wrestling route. And so before I met Ruben, I had a background at writing, producing, distributing pro wrestling. But Lucha Libre was always part of what, growing up in Los Angeles and being part of the Los Angeles wrestling community.
Okay.
Lucha was always part of something, but that really at that time could have meant just a single luchador on a show, because of course you wanted to have at least one luchador on the show.
Right.
It
Yeah, the
wasn't
token luchador.
Exactly. At Slammers, we had Hombre de Oro. And then, it's funny because there's a tag team that Ruben and I will often use for our events, our TV pilots, and our Expo Luchas. The tag team's known as Los Luchas, Phoenix Star and Zocre. And while on a Lucha Libre show, Los Luchas doesn't really make much sense because everybody's a lucha.
Right.
The Los Luchas tag team name made sense in the Southern California wrestling scene because they were often the only luchadors on a wrestling show in the early 2000s, basically.
Right.
So, but yeah, when I met Ruben through Conan, and I saw that we both kind of acknowledged that the one type of pro wrestling, there's so many different kind of subgenres of pro wrestling. There's hardcore wrestling, there's women's wrestling, there's more kind of just technical, let's go in there and wrestling. But the one area that we both saw is like, what part of wrestling can be brought bigger and to a more grand level than it's ever been, was Lucha Libre. And so after I did my MTV series, Wrestling Society X, I decided that moving forward, I wanted all of my attention in the wrestling space to be in Lucha Libre. And with Ruben's background, both, and there's kind of really the interpersonal relationships that Ruben has with a lot of the luchadors, and kind of my background in business building and entertainment with non-wrestling as well in the United States, it made sense that we can kind of come together and really try to build what I refer to as this machine. We've got so many cogs in this Masked Republic machine, that the background that you have right there, it's the many-headed Masked Republic. We are talent representation. We are IP builders. We are merchandisers. We are live event producers and content creators. And really building this entity that nothing else like it exists. There's no other company dedicated to expanding Lucha Libre outside of Mexico like we are.
So the two of you are basically the two halves of the brain, right? Like, so to speak, right? So Ruben kind of handles a lot of the talent relationship, from what I understand. Don't let me speak for you, but a lot of the talent relationship and all of the communications and such, because it's also a language barrier, and not to speak ill of anyone who can't speak Spanish, but you do have to communicate with your talent. So Ruben, correct me if I'm wrong, right? That's kind of your function.
Yeah, and if I can jump in on that, the initial, when I got into this, it was pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, pre-Twitter. So back in the day, 20 years ago, if you wanted to get a hold of a luchador, you had to actually be at the same show he or she are going to be at. So let's just say, I don't know, Psychosis is going to be at a show in Texas and you're a promoter in Chicago. Well, how are you going to get a hold of Psychosis? He lives in Mexico. You probably don't speak Spanish. You definitely don't have his number at home. And this was before you can just jump on a computer, find his Facebook page or his Instagram and get a hold of him. So a big part of where I came at the beginning was the necessity to be that bridge between Mexico and the U.S., between the talent in Mexico and the promoters in the U.S. And it happened by accident. I'd be on the road with these guys, and after a show, somebody would literally come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm a promoter. I do shows, 500 miles up the road. I want to do a show with you in a couple months. Can we talk?" And it was very easy for the wrestlers to just go, "Yeah, let me give you the number." And they would give them my number because I had a U.S. number. Back then I lived in San Diego, which is a border town with Tijuana, Mexico. So they would come into Tijuana, several times a month. So I would see them, and I ended up getting, all their home phone numbers. So when I'd be on the road with them, then they would just be, yeah, go ahead and talk to Ruben.
Talk to my guy. Yeah.
Yeah, talk to this guy. So I was the driver. I was the guy who carried the bags. Now we all, and Kevin, we all did these jobs, from timekeeping to ring announcing. I've done ring announcing as well. I've done timekeeping. So back then I started carrying bags to the shows with them and wheeling the luggages, and then somehow I became this agent for them, and that's what it was. Promoters were calling me and say, hey, so-and-so gave me your number. I want you to have a show. And I figured out that I was that bridge between them, between the wrestlers in Mexico and the promoters in the US. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the business per se, out of a necessity, because there was no other way to get a hold of these people unless you can call them at home. Right. Back then they had the Nextel radio.
Yeah. The push to talk.
Yeah, the push to talk.
Yeah, we had one of those big yellow.
So I was actually working before the push to talk came out. So when that came in, that made my business a lot easier. But back then you had to know somebody who knew these guys personally. So I became that guy, and a big part of it was the language barrier. These days, everybody has an Instagram, a Twitter, and any promoter can get on there and get a hold of them. But yeah, back then it was just a necessity of we needed a bridge between talent in Mexico and promoters in the U.S. And then it after a while it kind of flipped. Now promoters in Mexico are calling me and say, hey, can you get us American talent? So back.
Why would they go the other way? Why would the Mexican promoters call the U.S. for talent? Because you don't normally think of that, right? For Lucha Libre, right? You don't think about U.S. going into Mexico.
Yeah, but if you're a promoter in the U.S. and you bring an American in, you can do so many things. Obviously, they become an instant heel. So it doesn't have to be a major star in the U.S. If he's an American and speaks English, put him on your show, have him say a few words in English.
Yeah.
You're going to make money off of the guy.
So just for those who aren't aware of wrestling terminology, explain heel.
Oh, I'm sorry. The bad guy. He's the bad guy. So, a
lot of wrestling is about the storylines, right? And the drama and the building up and and the conflicts. And you always need a good villain.
Yes. And if you're a promoter in Mexico, easiest thing to do is to bring a non-Mexican in. He's going to be an instant villain. So at some point it kind of flipped where now promoters out of Mexico were calling me to ask me, hey, can you get a hold of these guys? Or I want to get these wrestlers. Who do you recommend? And I always joke, and it's true today, if they speak English, I probably don't know them. That's what kind of Kevin, they'd call me and I'd be like, hey, Kevin, there's this guy here.
Is he good? Should we worry?
Yeah, who do you recommend? So even to today, people ask me, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, do they speak English? Like, yeah, I'm like, probably don't know them. But yeah, so originally that's what it was, just that language barrier. We needed a bridge to connect both sides, and I happened to be the one guy. And like Kevin said, the interpersonal relationships that we have with these wrestlers made it very easy for me to be able to manage both sides.
Well, any successful business has to fulfill, at least one issue or a need, right? And that's what you guys ended up seeing and identifying in the market was like, there was a need for the talent to have access to promoters and vice versa. And if you could fulfill that need, then why not, right? You offer a service, and then obviously in our business, relationships is huge. Relationships is ideal. It's not about nepotism, so to speak. And, people think about having these relationships as like a negative thing where, oh, like I know somebody or whatever. It's actually it's a resource, for us, especially when I'm doing what I do. And of course you guys like, if I don't know how to do it, I know somebody who does. Right. And so then for us, it's about resources and maintaining those relationships. But, that's the core of your business. So it seems like you took that need and the representation aspect from, the luchadores and also from the promoter side and built that as part of your business model. So there's like, you guys have a couple of different business models, like I call them sub brands under the Mass Republic brand, right? So there's one, which I'm alluding to as the Legends of Lucha Libre sub brand. And then there's other ones. Which other ones are there, Kevin? You tell us.
Well, so we've got Expo Lucha, obviously, which is our convention that we've partnered with FanGirl on moving forward. And we've got, we also consider kind of our children's IP that's in development to be kind of separate. We've got 6 different IPs that all kind of fall under our Lucha Hero universe, which is kind of our preschool through middle school content, which is still yet to come. We have our Luchaverse, which is our kind of adult comic book world that we're developing for film and TV.
I see some of those covers behind you.
Yep. We've got Lucha Central, which is our kind of ESPN of Lucha Libre website and podcast network, and soon to come gaming network, and one more part of Lucha Central, which I'm blanking on at the moment. But
so it's like the media section, like of Lucha Libre, of like, you know, Mass Republic.
Yeah, and we've got, and then we've also got our other kind of sub brands on the merchandising side. We have Lucha Brothers brand now, which is a separate brand from Legends of Lucha Libre, which is more about the brothers and their own clothing line and brand. It's not necessarily just them and their masks, but kind of hip Hispanic targeted kind of apparel.
For those of you who don't know who Lucha Brothers are, they're probably one of the top tag team luchadors and tag team wrestlers in general in the world.
I mean, other than, so I was explaining this to someone the other day, you know, Rey Mysterio is probably a bigger household name globally because of his WWE exposure. You know, if you ask someone in Australia or in Singapore or something, you know, who's the biggest luchador, they're going to say Rey Mysterio. But when it comes to popularity amongst like 15 to 49-year-olds in the U.S., dare I would even say Mexico, in Europe, it's Penta these days. Pentagon Junior, Penta Zero M of the Lucha Brothers, with Rey Fénix, his brother, being kind of close behind in terms of kind of global.
The little brother has to tail behind.
In terms of kind of global popularity of luchadors. So we have that brand. And then we've got our other kind of brands that we only have so much time in the day to focus on. So, you know, we've got Ruda, which is a women's clothing and apparel line. We've got Saints and Rudos, which is a kind of surf skate, you know, line. And so like all these things we talk about it, you know, there are all these little cogs on this big machine. And sometimes we're more focused on one than the other, but, you know, kind of the end goal is that all of these are going to be kind of full-time brands and lines of business under Mass Republic.
So, you know, you going back to the Saints and Rudas and Rudo, right? Like, so explain to us, maybe Ruben, you can explain to us, you know, what's the significance in Lucha Libre for each of those, right? So how do you, and really for me, I guess the bigger question is, how do you then identify your fan base, right? And then it goes into then the business side with Kevin, like the consumer base, right? Of how you purchase things. So going back to the fans of Lucha Libre, explain to us a little bit about that and how do you tap into that a little bit?
Well, first of all, the Saints and Rudos is just another reference to, you know, the good guys and the bad guys in wrestlers and in Lucha Libre. The villains, the villains are known as Rudos, which are, you know, the rule breakers, and the good guys, quote unquote, are the Técnicos, you know, play by the rules and, you know, in theory.
That's me, unless the Lucha Brothers are wrestling then, as Kevin called me out recently.
But it comes down to basically, you know, good versus evil. And the Saints and Rudos is actually, it's something that I had come up with because a lot of the clothing that's out there for wrestling, I just can't wear. I grew up in San Diego, you know, at the beach. Occasionally went to school, hung out at the beach a lot, and I was into skating and supercross. So, you know, for me, I was, even now, if it's not Mass Republic, I'm wearing like Volcom, you know, or Hurley. So I always wanted something that can kind of mesh where even if you're not a Lucha Libre fan or a wrestling fan, you would look at it and go, wow, this is pretty cool.
Right.
And for example, the shirt that Kevin's wearing, it's our mask from our logo turned into Dia de los Muertos version that our friends from Cubito Gráfico out of Mexico kind of modified. So even if you're not a Lucha Libre or wrestling fan, there's still something for you. Right. And that's where these sub brands kind of came in.
Like lifestyling, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where we just wanted to hit as many people as possible. And, I know we've partnered with somebody a long time ago. And for example, there was a Rayo de Jalisco shirt, which is a famous wrestler. And he's got his Mexican sombrero and he's got like this charro outfit. And I'm like, I can't look cool wearing a dude on my chest, So we came up with these sub brands to try to hit the people that might be wrestling fans or Lucha Libre fans, but aren't like at that level where like they're not going to wear a John Cena shirt. They're not going to wear a Triple H shirt, but they might see that shirt that Kevin's wearing and say, wow, this is actually pretty cool.
Right.
And then the Saints and Rudos, if you know, if not, you're like, wow, that's actually pretty cool.
It's a little more subtle.
Yeah, a little. So that's kind of where that idea to have these different sub brands and lifestyle brands came in. And then, Kevin obviously knows where to insert those and how to kind of push those. But the idea originally for all those was just to hit as many people as possible, the real hardcore fans, and then the more subtle fans that are kind of like, I'll kind of wear that. I don't really know what it is, but it looks cool.
Right.
And I think too, it's important that everything usually starts with like what Ruben and I would like as our, because we are fans, like you said, from the, we were Lucha Libre fans. We continue to be Lucha Libre fans. We even have different sensibilities. There are certainly things that we'll come up with, and Ruben's like, "That's ugly. I don't know how that sells, but it sells." But even like
the masks, the COVID masks.
But just like as an example, yesterday we just launched with Hot Topic, our Legends of Lucha Libre.
Congratulations.
Collection. I'm very excited. I've been trying for 13 years. I've been trying Society X to break in the Hot Topic. And so we've got a few dozen designs. And when they were proposing, so what I really like about Hot Topic's kind of art department is half the stuff that's up there is stuff that we had created with our artists before, but then they went to work and they took our elements and they took our talent and our graphics and our art, and they proposed a bunch of shirts to us. And one of them that I just was not feeling, but I approved anyway, because I'm like, well, if they see it as something that might sell, it literally is probably, other than Pentagon shirts, it's probably the one that got the most comments and positive, notes online yesterday. And it's just the one with the Master Public mask with this like Hot Wheels looking flame behind it. And to me, I wasn't feeling that, but God bless Hot Topic for them knowing like somebody else. So I think, we know
their consumer base of like who's going to buy what.
Yeah. And so, as much as we always start really with the base of what's cool to us, we always really kind of try to look at, like I said, like Ruda is a line geared towards women. It's run by women. The designs are created by a designer named Danny Gosha. And it's all about, again, kind of, you don't have to be a fan of Lucha Libre to just hear the word Ruda or understand like Ruda is the bad girl, and just kind of be into that Ruda lifestyle vibe, as opposed to just like, a luchador or luchadora on the shirt. So these are all kind of long-term project brands for us, but Lucha Brothers brand seems to be the next one that's going to kind of hopefully move forward with some retail, and then we'll continue working on Ruda and Saints and Rudos and everything else.
So tell us about, you made a good point about male versus female, right? Like the luchadores versus luchadoras. So, explain to us that dynamic. I mean, one of you can pick this one, but what's the significance? It's very, I understand it. I know it's very different. It's actually more, to me, it's actually more equal, as far as like how each one is represented, how they are. The women are still lagging a little bit, but but there are mixed matches where the women are wrestling the men and vice versa. It's like all of this type of dynamic where you don't see that in mainstream pro wrestling here in the States. So like, what's the background behind that, and what do you see going forward?
You want to take that?
Who wants to take that one? Ruben, you want to take that one?
I'll just start off real quick by just kind of identifying what the different types of characters are. Within Lucha Libre, you obviously have the male wrestlers, and they can be, good or bad, technical or rudo. And then you do have the females. And in Mexico, the female is up to the same par as the male wrestlers. There's intergender matches. There's actually a championship that AAA has, which is an intergender. So it's a female and a male, and they can be tag team partners, intergender tag team partners. And then you also have in Mexico the minis, which are the smaller, wrestlers. And I think it's for those that are like under 5 feet tall. You can't be taller than 5, but they're called minis over there. And a lot of times they're this mini or small version of a larger wrestler. But even the minis are put into matches with full scale, full size wrestlers. There's a full size wrestler, a female, and a mini. That's very common. And then you also have that other category of exóticos, which are the flamboyant, cross-dressing, a lot of times, gay wrestler who is out of the closet and says, yeah, I'm gay. This is how I dress. I cross-dress. And then
they'll still kick your butt.
What's that?
And they'll still kick your butt.
Actually, some of them are really good. Kevin will talk more in detail about Cassandra, who, I've known when I first got into the business, but in the ring, he's a beast. You see this guy come out and he's got these long coats and feathers and pink colors and a singlet or a leotard, and he's got his makeup on and everything. But when the bell rings, he's a luchador. And at least within Lucha Libre, once the bell rings, they're not going to be like, well, you're a female, I can't hit you, or you're a mini, or once the bell rings, everybody's on the same playing field.
Well, if you're in the ring, like, you better be in the ring to take a hit, right? I mean, you can't be in there to mess around. Like, this is not a game. It may be lots of pageantry, and we can get into a little bit more of like, what people call fake, right? But in order to be fake and not everybody be hurt and do all these flips and, extreme moves, you have to have skill.
Yeah, so, and everybody within those categories have those skills. So, if you're wrestling a mini, you're going to have to hit him because he's small. Doesn't mean he's not going to hit you. So within Lucha Libre, all that is accepted. There's not this separation. Well, we can't put the females with the men. No, everything goes. In the U.S., it's a bit different, and I'll let Kevin dive into that. But, at least within Lucha Libre in Mexico, if you're a luchador, doesn't matter if you're a mini, exótico, female or male, you're in there. You're in there. You're a luchador. You're going to be put in these matches. But, Cassandra, for example, an exótico, gay wrestler, but he's won championships. He's beaten Hijo del Santo. He's beaten Dr. Wagner, the who's who.
Those are like titans in the Lucha Libre.
Those are giants of this game, and legendary wrestlers. And I got to know him very well personally, and he would tell me, look, they don't go easy on me just because I'm flamboyant or I'm gay, so I'm not going to go easy on them. So once the bell rings within Lucha Libre, it's fair game. If you're in there, that means you're prepared, you're qualified to be there, you're professional, you've got enough training. In the U.S., it's a bit different. We don't see as much of that, but I'll let Kevin kind of dive into the difference between the Mexican acceptance and the U.S.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's really changed over the last number of years. Like Ruben said, traditionally, at least within AAA, because CMLL is much more traditional, but AAA has been around.
AAA and CMLL are what exactly?
Yeah, so they, if you think of in the U.S. in traditional pro wrestling here, WWE, WWF was always like the big brand, and then for a long time in the '90s, you had WCW. So you had Ted Turner's WCW, Vince McMahon's WWE. Those were the big two, as they were called. And so in Mexico, you also have the big two. It's CMLL, which has been around for 80 plus years. They were kind of the first organized. There were Lucha Libre matches before CMLL.
Yeah.
But the first really organized business of Lucha Libre in Mexico was CMLL. And it's been a much more traditional kind of, still a lot of it's like it was in the olden days, 2 out of 3 fall matches, a lot more focus on like the older luchadors and more traditional kind of, more traditional wrestling.
More grappling.
And then not that they don't do the high flying and that they don't have that, but there's a more traditional approach to Lucha Libre. And then about 25 or so years ago now, out of CMLL, a lot of the big stars and one of the main writers and creators left to form AAA. And the AAA has always kind of been more of the WWE, WWF in Mexico. More pageantry, more storyline, more kind of wackiness, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so there's a lot of traditional Lucha Libre fans that look at AAA as garbage, and then there's a lot of AAA fans that look at CMLL as boring. And you know, both have both qualities, right? There are tremendous high-flying, you know, wrestlers and great modern grapplers in CMLL, and there are, you know, the kind of, when a CMLL wrestler goes to AAA, oftentimes they're shocked at actually how good the wrestlers in AAA are, because they're like, oh, we just always heard you guys were garbage, but there was a match that's kind of become known, at least outside of Mexico, as the Peña. Antonio Peña was the founder of AAA. But the Peña Special, which would often open their pay-per-view shows, which was a male wrestler, a female wrestler, an exotico, and a mini against another set of male, female. And, you know, I remember back in, this is probably in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, going to a show in Tijuana at the Auditorio. And while I had seen the mixed tag team matches or man versus woman matches on television, in Lucha Libre, I had never seen one in person. And I don't remember who the male was. I remember that the female was a luchadora named Tiffany. And I could not believe how stiff, as we call it in wrestling, how they were punching and kicking, and they were wrestling and beating the crap out of each other. And it was such a different experience because in American wrestling, even in WWE, you'll have what they'll call a mixed tag team match, but the man and the woman are never allowed to fight each other. So if the man tags out to the woman, then the other woman has to come in.
Right.
I think a lot of that also has to do with the, especially for television in the United States, there's always been this, with wrestling, this, you know, man versus woman violence and not wanting to get there. And that really did not start to change until Lucha Underground came along, because in part, Lucha Underground was created by Robert Rodriguez, the filmmaker. And if you look in the world of film, and this has kind of been the argument over the last number of years, it's okay in a film for a man and a woman to go and have a great fight scene where the man's kicking the woman's butt and the woman's kicking the man's butt. And it's not seen necessarily as promoting domestic violence, as it's always kind of been in American wrestling.
Right.
And so Lucha Underground is really the first place on television that wasn't Lucha Libre where you would get these really, you know, man versus women serious matches. Because there had been gimmick matches before where, you know, it was more of a comedy thing or this or that. But when it came to actual, let's go in there and wrestle and let's put on the best wrestling match possible. And there's been this kind of movement. There's this ranking, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which is the only real wrestling magazine you can still find on newsstands in the United States. They do this thing called the PWI 500 every year, where they'll rank the top 500 wrestlers. And it's always been the male PWI 500, and then there will be like a female PWI 100 or something. And this year, it actually just came out yesterday, is the first year that they said basically if a woman traditionally participates in intergender wrestling matches, then we'll rank her as well in the PWI 500. Okay. But you're still really only seeing those intergender matches on the independent wrestling scene. Maybe you're seeing it in Impact Wrestling a little bit. You're not really seeing it in Ring of Honor, but on the independent scene, it's really become, you know, to someone who's not familiar with wrestling, it's kind of like the minor leagues of wrestling. You're seeing that more and more. And there's a lot of women who are like, don't judge me as a woman wrestler. Judge me as a wrestler. Let me go out there and show my skills. And there's actually a really good documentary that I just watched last weekend on the WWE Network about Sasha Banks and Bayley and how they kind of changed the perception of women's wrestling in WWE, because up to about 5 years ago or whatever it was, the WWE version of female wrestling was their diva division. Yeah. And they didn't want women going out there and wrestling. They wanted them hair pulling and slapping, hair tossing and
cat fights and stuff.
Exactly. And these women athletes were coming along like, we can wrestle. Let us go out there and wrestle. And there's this great part in it where Sasha's saying how they wouldn't go to the ring and kind of do any walkthrough of their matches before, because every time they did, a producer or an executive would say, oh, don't do that in your match. Don't do that dive. Don't do that this. So they stopped even giving people a glimpse into what they were going to do in their matches, so they couldn't be told no.
Right.
And the same thing kind of applies with Cassandro, as Ruben brought up. There had always been exoticos, or not always, but for decades, there had been exoticos in Lucha Libre. And at first, they were actually straight men who were just playing these effeminate characters.
Right.
And eventually, it became actually gay men who were out of the closet playing these characters. But they were still really seen as comedy relief. And Cassandro was really the first one to come along and be like, I'm an athlete. I'm a great wrestler. Why do I have to go out there and only be comedy? Like, I'll do my character. I'll be my character, and I'll be effeminate, and I'll blow the kisses, and I'll do this and that. But when it comes to the grappling, let me go out there and let me show that I am actually a very talented world-class athlete. And when it happened that he became the first real champion, it was basically a shock to the system in Mexico.
No.
A lot of people were against it. A lot of people, and there's a couple of documentaries out about Cassandro that are well worth watching. And now it was just announced a few weeks ago that there's actually going to be a movie now made based off of his life and based off his documentaries. And I'm really excited that, as Ruben said, we've worked with Cassandro on and off throughout the years, here or there, but we've now brought him into the Legends of Lucha Libre family, and we're going to be representing him for his licensing and merchandising. So
that's great.
Very excited about that opportunity, and really being able to, just like with the women wrestlers and the luchadoras, we're really excited that Boss Fight are partners for action figures and collectibles.
Right.
Not only are we doing action figures with them, but they have this great line called I Am Brilliance, which is kind of interesting careers for women, so that women aren't always having to be the nurse or the assistant or here are these great,
the secretary or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they've wanted to include luchadores in that line. So I think that's great, and I'm really excited about that. And so it is a different world. Women are certainly in Lucha Libre held to or put on a higher equal pedestal.
Yeah, like a higher standard. What's interesting to me, I mean, and probably other people looking in, where they think they understand Hispanic culture, which is very male dominated, machismo, all of that. There's two things that stand out with what you guys are saying is, number one, the females are put on the same level playing field, right, in acceptance as the males. And then number two, that the exoticos and the gay, wrestlers who just want to be wrestlers, right, not identified as gay wrestlers, are accepted as well and celebrated even. So, what do you guys say to that when people who think they understand what Hispanic culture is about, looking from the outside in, what do you say about that when that kind of goes against what people understand as cultural, right? What do you think about that, Ruben?
I just think the times have changed. I think what was not accepted back in the day. I mean, it's just. I just think the times have changed. Yeah. Things that our parents would not maybe accepted. These days, it's not a big deal. You're gay, all right? Who cares? Can you wrestle this guy? Okay, cool. I'm gonna put you in the match with this guy.
The promoter's like, are you really gonna make me money or what? I don't care about the rest.
How many asses can you put in the seats? Go. I don't care what the hell you are. If you're a good wrestler, and you want to wrestle, go wrestle. And I just think it's just newer generation stuff is more accepted these days. And I just think it's just that thing with, it's just the times are changing. And in Mexico, Lucha Libre is such a big cultural, it's a big part of the culture that, if it's accepted at that large scale down there, then, why would you not accept it elsewhere? So I think eventually, it's gonna be accepted outside of Mexico in wrestling, just as it's been in Mexico for years. I mean, like Kevin said, there's always been these exotico characters. It's all the fans want to know is, okay, yeah, cool, you're flamboyant, but can you wrestle?
Right.
The fans will let you know if you don't know how to wrestle and you suck, they're gonna boo the hell out of you, just like they do the females,
regardless of any fandom, the
over
fans
there,
will tell you
over
if it's
there,
good or bad.
yeah, the fans over there will let you know. They don't care. They don't give you special treatment. Oh, he's a mini. We can't. We can only boo him half the time. No, if you're a mini, you're gonna get booed just like the big guys. And if you're next to Celtico, but I just think the times are changing. The times have changed. And I'll tell a quick story. When I first brought Cassandra to San Diego, my parents are Christian ministers. I grew up in a Christian church, believe it or not. So
that's a whole nother live stream to talk about.
I ended up hanging around with men in tights. But the first time I brought Cassandra, when I would do my live shows, I would let my parents do the snack bar because they would put up with all my nonsense my entire life. I figure, how can I repay them? I'll let them have the snack bar, thinking we ain't gonna make any money. They were making a killing, by the way. So I let them have a snack bar. And the first time I brought Cassandra, and I was really worried because my dad's a pastor of a church. Cassandra was openly gay, and I'm like, oh shit, how's this gonna work out? But once you get to know him, he is one of the nicest, most genuine people on earth. And before I knew it, when it was showtime, Cassandra and my dad were hitting it up, laughing at the snack bar, hanging out, just like normal people. And I went to talk to my parents, and they love the guy. They still ask about him, how's he doing? Where is he at? And I think even for somebody as my parents, they're in their
that's traditional
now. Once you get to know him and you realize, look, this is a professional athlete,
right?
And he's here because he's one of the best in the world. Doesn't matter if he's gay,
right.
Who cares? Whatever, And I just think it's part of the times that things change now. It wasn't back in the day. Elvis his hip move.
Oh yeah, they didn't want to show the camera from the waist down.
Yeah, exactly. And now we have
Mama too much being shown from the waist down.
What was that?
We have too much.
Oh, you have all sorts of stuff on TV.
Yeah.
I just think the times have changed and there's more acceptance of what's out there. But within the Lucha Libre world, the fans, they're not going to give you any special treatment either. If you're good, you're good. If not, they will let you know, regardless of what side, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, or tall or short. So it doesn't matter once you get into that world.
I think we actually have a comment or a question from the audience.
Yes. So this is from El Polo 13. Hello guys, I'm new to Lucha Libre. What company do you recommend me to watch? AAA, CMLL, or WWE?
CMLL, AAA, which company to watch more, or WWE? So for someone who is new to Lucha Libre. Well, I would say, me personally, and you guys are the experts, but I would say don't look to WWE for Lucha Libre. That's just my opinion at that point, but you guys can go.
Kevin,
nothing against WWE. It's just, that's not the home of Lucha Libre. That's all.
Kevin.
Kevin.
Kevin's more politically correct and nice about stuff like that.
Kevin.
I'll let him answer it because I have my point of view on stuff.
I think the breakdown that I gave before was what I'd kind of stick with, right? So first out, to Anita's point, while there are luchadors in WWE, you don't actually get lucha libre matches in WWE. Every now and then, maybe you'll see something, and when Andrade versus Rey, or when you get Garza versus, maybe Lince Dorado at some point or whatever, you're going to get a more lucha match, but you're not getting lucha libre in WWE. You're just getting to see luchadors do American wrestling, which is cool. And it's great to see them kind of get to those levels and make those big WWE contracts. So nothing wrong with that, but that's not, lucha libre. When it comes to, if you are just getting your foot in the door, especially if you are a person under the age of 50, then I would say, for the most part, AAA is probably easier to digest. It's more of what you're used to from professional wrestling. It's one fall matches. It's, shorter matches. It's got a little bit of everything for everybody. They've got some matches that are going to be just great high flying matches. They've got some matches that are going to be more traditional, more heavyweight lucha libre. And then you've got your blood and guts, plunder, lucha extrema matches. So it's more of a modern presentation of wrestling and of lucha libre. if you want to sit down with a grandparent who grew up in Mexico watching Lucha Libre and Bond, you're probably going to want to watch CMLL because it's much more traditional.
Yeah.
And again, there are definitely the Dragon Lees of the world, the Rushas of the world, a lot of other wrestlers who are part or have been part of CMLL who are more modern, or will speak to a more modern audience. The hard part with CMLL too is you're going to see your classics there, your Blue Panthers and your Felinos and really great kind of classic names of Lucha Libre. But the best part of CMLL, to me at least, usually are the opening matches, the younger guys who haven't made it to the top of the card yet. That's where you're getting
warm-up matches, warming up the crowds.
Yeah, you're great. You're up and coming kind of high flying wrestlers who are going to put on these great spectacular, what the common person thinks of when they think of Lucha Libre. But the system of CMLL is that you could spend 6, 8, 10 years on these undercard matches and you don't necessarily really progress up the card, which is why a lot of times people will leave and find great success in AAA. A guy like Puma King, who was just working these kind of lower level CMLL matches for years and then went over to AAA and was suddenly kind of towards the upper echelons. Or the guy who is Psycho Clown, who's probably the most popular AAA wrestler now. He spent years kind of just around CMLL before going to AAA and having one gimmick and then ending up in Psycho Clown. But the other thing I was going to mention before, real quick, not to change the subject, but on your question about the perception of Mexico and Mexican culture, the other thing that's really important for Lucha Libre that is kind of an important thread as well in Mexican culture is the family. And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't always think about. And that's both from the fandom side and from the inside of the business part. In traditional wrestling, I mean, right now in WWE, there's probably a couple second, a few third generation wrestlers. But in Lucha Libre, you've got these family dynasties with 15 family members.
That's where the junior comes from. It's like a name plus uncle. Junior.
Yep. And so you've got these family trees. But that also, I think, plays into the fandom. I don't think there's a lot of what in American television these days we call co-viewing. I don't think that there's a lot of co-viewing going on these days for traditional American pro wrestling. WWE's biggest rating, it comes from 50 plus adults, 50 years old plus adults. You're not getting the younger generations into wrestling. AEW now is starting to do that a little bit more with their product, but with Lucha Libre, it's this family affair, both live and watching on television. And when you go to a Lucha Libre show, you'll see the grandmother who's like probably more into the show sometimes than the kid. And so you've got these.
Well, that happened in our household, and we're not even Mexican. I mean, just as a generalization about Lucha Libre, yes, it is kind of the heart and soul is based in Mexico. But for those not knowing, it has grown outside of Mexico and gone into, Cuba and Caribbean countries like, Puerto Rico, and then out into, South America and beyond. Now it's like in Japan is a huge hotspot, for Lucha Libre, like specifically Lucha Libre style, wrestling and stuff. But in our my household, there was co-viewership going on because I was actually watching with my father. So since we were, I was a bilingual kid, we could flip from English to Spanish, and I was watching the WCWs and all that stuff. I know I'm dating myself, but we're watching that, and then it'd be like, Saturday at 12, and that part would be over. And he would flip the channel and it'd be on Telemundo, Univision, whatever the local station was. And then we'd be watching Lucha Libre, and all these other folks, like the Conans of the world, right, would be on the screen. So, beyond just Mexico, it has grown to encompass more of a Latino, Hispanic kind of flavor, and that multi-generational aspect of the fandom really does apply. So, that's part of the business aspect too, of like going back full circle, right, of where you guys started in the conversation, which is, there's a little something for everybody, whether you are, hardcore fan and you want a mask and you want to wear the mask, it's like the equivalent of like wearing your face paint when you go to a football game or something. But, the other side could be just, the subtlety. And if because you've been in it so long, you don't need to tout it as much, maybe, or maybe that's just not your style, right? So you have a little something for everybody. There's also within the rainbow fandom, there's also the rainbow of the Hispanic, Latino culture and influence and the family aspect. Yeah, I mean, that co-viewership and multi-generational piece is very, very important. And it's funny because that's very similar to other fandoms. You look at other superheroes and,
Star
fantasy,
Wars.
whatever, Star Wars. I mean, I talk about it a lot, so I've tried not to name it this time, but I can't get away from it. But it's not a bad thing. It's just that, yes, it's very much that, generational and someone introduced you to it, usually a caregiver. I think we have another
Yes.
question or comment. Yes.
So where can I order some of the Mass Republic merchandise?
Where can we order some Mass Republic merchandise?
Well, I'm glad my mom's question made it in.
Following us on, and not to get ahead, but following us on social media at Master Republic everywhere is the best place to keep track of what's coming out and where and how. When we started, I remember vividly, Ruben and I going to a show at the Auditorio in TJ, probably, 9 years ago now, maybe, and talking with the wrestlers and getting them on board for what at first, for our merchandising at first, now we have Legends of Lucha Libre, this actual brand, this actual trademark, this actual licensing, world. But when we first started, we were literally trying to figure out how do we bridge that gap of providing merchandise for fans outside of Mexico that they can get without having to import from Mexico. And also, how do we make sure that the luchadors are getting paid on this stuff and it's not just bootleg product, because that's
right.
What was out there. Because I think with a lot of fandoms, I know this, this carries over into anime, this carries over into other fandoms. If you give fans the opportunity to buy official merchandise, they'll buy that official merchandise. The bootlegging really blows up when there's not official merchandise to buy. Right. And so when we started, we were just making and working with a local printer and silk screening t-shirts and selling them off of our website. But now we've really moved into a more traditional licensing model, which has allowed us to offer a lot more products and also better customer service because we're not having to pack and ship orders ourselves. So we have a website called luchashop.com, which has a lot of the stuff that we do kind of sell directly. Right now, it's mostly just like our Luchaverse comic books, and every now and then we'll have some masks and things. Sometimes we'll have our action figures, but Pro Wrestling Tees is one of our biggest partners for apparel, prowrestlingtees.com/massrepublic. And then also, as we just mentioned earlier, we launched in Hot Topic. There are more apparel deals coming. We mentioned Boss Fight, where we have our action figures. The first ones are up for pre-order. That's bossfightshop.com. Through our social media, you can find a lot of our stuff, and even Amazon. You go to amazon.com/massrepublic. We kind of use that to curate some of the things even that we don't sell directly. But if you go there, you can find our calendar. You can find our thumb wrestling kit. You can find our Halloween costumes. You can find, a number of our t-shirts that are available on Amazon. So
you even have COVID masks too, right? I know that Ruben's not a big fan of those, but you even have some of those.
So if you go to lucha-masks.com, we have officially licensed PP. So these are COVID masks that are not going to, you wouldn't wear these in surgery, but
not like the N95.
No, but these meet your state and local requirements for being masked in public. And so, from Mascarita Dorada to Penta, Zero M to Perros del Mal, you can go to lucha-masks.com and you can get these really cool, and to me, just like the masks behind me, like once we all survive and get through this COVID world, these are still going to be really cool collector's items to have, on display or wherever.
Ruben likes that idea.
Remember when I said that we try to throw different things out there because there's a product for everybody.
Yeah, there's something there.
Now listen, I will tell you this. God bless Gabriel Ramirez, our friends from Pro Wrestling Revolution. This Kevin told me, hey, what do you think about doing this? And I'm like, oh my God, I hate those. Because outside of Master Republic, I work at a hospital. And when this whole COVID thing came on board, I started noticing people wearing these masks with, Star Wars or, some type of character. Now I said, oh my God, that's so stupid. Just wear a regular blue mask like we all, like normal humans.
Because if you got to wear it, you got to look fashionable. Hello?
Fandom.
Whatever.
Right.
Fandom.
I look at my background. I don't have the stuff that Kevin does. So you can tell where my line of thinking is. But let me tell you, God bless Gabe Ramirez, because I'm going to be able to put a down payment on a house with those masks. Everybody loves them. It's incredible.
They're really fun. We wear ours.
I was wrong. This is one of the things that Kevin says. Sometimes we don't agree on, what's going to work. I said, that's not going to work. Those are horrible. Best sellers ever.
Yeah.
They're
well,
great.
We have a couple, and we have worn them to our local Costco. And let me tell you, people were like all about it, and we've gotten compliments. So they're like, we know who to call. It's the superheroes if there's a problem. So, so with that, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for attending with me this week. I really appreciate your time. We didn't even get into like all the licensing stuff, so we're gonna have to do this again at some point, I'm sure. But Ruben, Kevin, thank you again for Master Republic. Thank you all. Happy Fangirl Friday for tuning in. Tune in again next week. I'm sure we have something else lovely for you to see. And if not, check out our YouTube. We've got a bunch of content that you can catch up on. This will be on Instagram story for another 24 hours, and it'll be on our Facebook page. So find us somewhere. Fangirl Licensing, Fangirl Consulting, Brand Management. I'm Anita Castellar. Happy Fangirl Friday. See you next week. Thanks, guys.